Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated in loving memory of Lillian Shmat, Ken Carey's mother, Grace Carey, Aliyah Shalom, by Ken and Lillian Carey. Chazak Baruch. Thank you, number one, for listening, and number two, for sponsoring Lillian Shmata. Also, week of Breakfast in the Class dedicated in loving memory of Lillian Shmat, Avraham ben Yecheskel and Zolecha, Aliyah Shalom. Sponsored by Judy and Maurice Chosh. Also sponsored and dedicated for the Fruash of Eliyahu Shimon Mazal Fortuné and Chana Bat Simafega. As well, the learning for this week is dedicated by the Torah Center Diamond Donors in honor of Michael and Elizabeth Dishi in celebration of the birth of their twin boys. And we'd like to wish them a Mazal Tov and Baruch for the stupendous, the incredible Brit Milah that we had yesterday upstairs and in this room. And we'd like to welcome to this world these two young boys, Chaim and Yaakov Emet and Yaakov. Be'ezrat Hashem, they should make their parents and grandparents and two uncles really proud in everything that they do. The week of Cobra was sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to good today and every day. Let's begin, my friends. Our parasha, Ve'ela Mishpatim, discusses the laws that are placed in front of the Jewish people, but also discusses the laws that revolve around a bet din and how a bet din is supposed to judge cases. In fact, Sammy quite beautifully read this morning. Please only say amen if you're listening to this live. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'sha'al kol yom baro. V'higisho Adonav el ha'elokim. Is it ha'elokim? No. Higisho Adonav el ha'elohim. Why? It's not referring to God. Who does the master bring the servant in front of? Elohim means bet din. There's many concepts and ideas that are surrounding the fact that a bet din is called Elohim. Why would they be called that? The name of God is a court. Why should that be the case? So I want to share with you a couple of ideas on that before we get to our the gist of our class today. The Chachamim tell us that a judge that rules din emet, if he judges and rules the correct halakha, it's like he's a partner with God in the act of creation. Fascinating expression there. Because he ruled that this guy owes that guy $50, because he rules that you have to pay for the fender bender, because he says that the obligation in the get is like this, now the halakha should be that it's like he's a partner with God in creation? And the answer is yes. Why? Because God created a world. And in that world, God put all sorts of physical things. Trees and animals and oceans and water and everything. But the world of God is the world of the physical that He created. God's world is not the world of law, not the world of mitzvot. Now that sounds paradoxical. That God, who is the source of all spirituality, should not be that His world is the world of spirituality. The answer is yes. Why? Because God's spirituality in this world is dependent on people making the correct choice. God doesn't put prayer into this world, Torah study into this world, charity in this world. God puts money in this world. God puts things that you could sell and buy in this world. Now I've sold it. Now I've bought it. Now I have that money. I get to decide whether or not I'm going to do the mitzvah. So a judge, when he rules correctly in a court case, he's instituting a world of law, a world of morality, of ethics. And that, my friends, was given to human beings to be able to implement. So when a judge does that, he becomes a partner with God in creation. Because God created element A for this world. But there's a second element of this world, that the world should run according to God's plan. Who decides that? The Jewish people. Who decides that? You and me. Who decides that for us? Our rabbis, our leaders, and our judges. Like the pasuk says, Shofetim v'shotirim titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha. You have to have judges and enforcers of that judgment in every city. So my friends, if that's the power of a judge, the power of a court, to institute the rule of law in the world, one of the things that makes godlessness so prevalent in society is the abject lack of justice that we are living with. It's not just that things are incorrect, that things are bad. But when there isn't, when we abolish the rule of law, when we take justice, correct and incorrect, and we make it, I was listening last night to the radio when I was driving with my daughter. And this woman comes on the radio, and she's talking about how important it is to teach your child that there's no truth in the world, and that there's so many different versions of the truth, and it's important. How is your child going to deal? We're coming up to an election. How is your child going to deal with the fact that there are different viewpoints? And what if they're very triggered? I'm like, how is this on a news station? And the answer is, in this world, this is the thing. Condition your children to, you know what you should tell your children? Don't be triggered by another viewpoint. That's what you should teach your children. Not that everybody is entitled to another truth and everyone sees the world in another way and everyone is correct at the same time. It's insanity. But my friends, when a judge institutes and says, this is the law, this is correct, and they're not ashamed to do it, and they're not embarrassed to do it, and the city stands behind the purveyors and the communicators of that law and supports them, then what happens? Then you have law, order, godliness. The world is run in a correct way. Only yesterday did we hear the news where a band of migrants got up and beat a cop in this city. And the laws in place in New York City right now are not going to allow us to tell people who came for the privilege of living in this country, who then are beating up the judges and the enforcers of that judge in the streets of the city. And they will be protected by our laws from us deporting them or even incarcerating them. My friends, that tells you everything you need to know. You know what our parasha is? Mishpatim. We must stand behind the rule of law. There has to be consequences to people's actions. You can't say that someone, Hazit, he grew up with this, he grew up with that, therefore he's patur for the rest of his life. I don't have to die because of your sad story. What I should do is help you turn your sad story around. But I can promise you one thing. If we let you perpetuate your sad story, then there's never an exit ramp from this strategy. That's ve'ele hamishpatim. Our rabbis tell us something fantastic. I want to read you the words. Darash bar kapara, he taught. Mina milta, where did we learn this idea? The Tanakh that the Mishnah says in Avot, havu mitunim badin. You should be, mitunim means balanced. You should be patient in judgment. Dichtiv, because the pasuk says, lo ta'ale b'ma'alot al mizbechi. The last pasuk, which is what I actually spoke about Shabbat morning in the main minyan, the last pasuk, and as well in the afternoon class in another way, the last pasuk of last week's parasha is Lo ta'ale b'ma'alot al mizbechi. Don't go with stairs onto my mizbeach. Rather, what should there be instead? A ramp. Okay? We learned two different lessons about that on Shabbat morning. Then the pasuk continues. What's the next pasuk? Right after the last pasuk of last week's parasha, the first pasuk of this week's parasha. What comes right after that? V'samichle, and it says after that, ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem. These are the laws you should place before them. So since that precedes this, therefore, what do we see? Hevu mitunim badin. You should be patient in judgment. I feel like this is a little bit of a word puzzle. Okay? One more time. It says don't go up the mizbeach on stairs. Then it says ela mishpatim. What do we learn from here? Hevu mitunim badin. You should be patient and balanced in judgment. So there's different ways to understand what Bar Kapara was leaning on when he brought this idea. But I want to first express the idea and the way we learn it, and then hopefully express the idea in its immediately applicable method. Perhaps Bar Kapara was saying, a simple way of understanding it, is that the stairs require a person to take pre-prescribed steps forward, so it sets a pace of how you're going to rise. So there's an element of quickness which is illustrated by stairs. That's one understanding. A ramp, a person can approach slower, right? Because there are not set amounts of height in between each step. So therefore, in using a ramp, a person can approach the Mizbeach in a slower fashion. So therefore, says Kpar Kapara, if it tells you to go slowly up the Mizbeach, and then it tells you, Ela Mishpatim, it's telling you that these two things are connected. In fact, not only that, it doesn't say Ela Mishpatim, it says Ve'ele. Vav always connects to the thing before. So Ve'ele, and is a connector. So therefore, this slow is carrying into here. So therefore, judge slow. Let's work with that for the time being. I want to explain what this looks like. Al Chachamim tell us that when a person is a judge, it's very important and imperative for them to be able to listen to the court case in its entirety. So someone called me the other day and said, Rabbi, I need you to tell me what the halakha is. I have a court case with this guy, not a court case, a dispute with this guy, this is the situation. He goes, Rabbi, this is the case, what do you say? I said, I say that I'm not stupid enough to ever give a ruling or an opinion on a story after only having heard from one side. In fact, the halakha mifurash says that a judge is not allowed to rule on a court case until he's heard from both people. Not only that, not only does he need to hear from both people, says the Gemara, you can't let one speak long and one speak short. You can't give kavod to one and not the other. You can't have one walk in dressing beautifully with a beautiful suit and the other guy with holes in his knees. Why? Says Rashi, quoting in the Gemara, he says because the person will get overwhelmed. He'll think that the other guy is going to be judged more favorably. They're going to pay attention to him. And what happens? Nistatmu ta'anotav. His ta'anot, his ideas, his defense is going to be presented as lacking because he gets too caught up in the moment and maybe under a little bit too much pressure. In fact, fascinating Gemara. One of my favorite Gemaras. Gemara says in Sanhedrin, there was a certain rabbi that was ruling on a court case, and the court case was between a big rabbi and a regular guy. Halakha is, a big rabbi walks into the room, what do you have to do? You have to stand up, that's halakha. Nesevat takum, ve'adat ha'penei zaken. Mitzvat aseh midoraita from the Torah. Right? People don't know that. Mitzvat aseh from the Torah, to stand for a chacham, to show him kavod. Anyway, the judge knows that if this big chacham walks in, he's going to have to stand up. What's going to happen then to the other guy? The other guy's going to feel like, oh, the rabbi has such respect for this big, I have no chance. He's going to be over on the mitzvah of besedek tishpot amitecha, on judging correctly. So what does he do? He tells the court clerk, okay, he says, go out and get a goose. This is one of the strangest Gemaras. I love this Gemara so much. Go out and get a goose. He says, okay, sure, I got it, sure, goose. Well, yeah, fine, no problem. He says, and when the rabbi comes in, right as the rabbi comes in, throw the goose at me. I just imagine, by the way, being the court clerk. Sorry, there was interference on the line. I don't think I caught what you said. Throw the goose at you, right? Why? As soon as the rabbi walks in, plan works to perfection. The guy throws the goose at the rabbi. Rabbi jumps out of his seat. He stood up for the chacham, right? But it wasn't obvious that was why he was standing up. Now, why am I sharing this with you? This is not to raise the price of geese. The idea is, havu mitunim badin. It means that when it comes to judgment, a person needs to be patient enough to be able to get the job done right. And sometimes, if you don't have patience in deen, in judging, as a judge, as a rabbi, what's going to happen? You're not going to understand the whole case. Or you're going to understand the whole case, but you're going to mess up the implementation of justice. So therefore, what is required in deen? Mitunim. They need to be patient. Now, let me give you an example of what this patience can yield in deen. The examples that our chachamim bring down. The great mehaber of the Netivot HaMishpat, a very insightful, very, very, very complicated book that's written on halakha, the Netivot. His name was of Yaakov Melissa. One day, two people come to him from the fair, and they tell him, look, I have an argument. What's the argument? This guy says, listen, I found a coin, a gold coin, and this guy, he saw that I found the coin, and he said it's his. But, I don't believe him. He wasn't crying about losing a coin before. So the other guy says, what do you mean? Of course I wasn't crying about it before. I didn't know that I lost it, that I saw that you had it. And back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, the rabbi looks at this guy and he, kind of estimates what he thinks is going on over here. He says to the man who says the coin was his, he says, please wait outside the office and close the door. Guy goes outside the office, he closes the door. The rabbi then turns to the fellow, he takes the coin, and he says, listen, the truth is, the only way he gets this coin from you is if he's able to show that there's a siman. Let me see the coin, I want to see if there's a siman on the coin. Guy gives him the coin. Anyway, he says, I see that there's a little bit of a divot next to a little bit of a hole, like almost a depression in the gold, right next to the date on the coin. If he's able to give a siman like that on the coin, then we'll have no choice but to give it to him. But if he can't give a siman, the halakha is it's yours. Anyway, guy comes back. He tells the fellow. He says, "Sir, come back in." Guy comes back in. He says, "Listen, money. It's not. There's not really a siman, but the way you're saying it, normally we think that a person finds money in a place like that. It's yush, but you didn't have time. It was immediately after you say it fell out of your pocket. There was no time for yush. Okay, so if you have a siman, you could claim the coin." So the guy says, "There's a hole in the coin right next to the date." The rabbi smiles and he says, "I guess this is not your coin, because this coin has no hole next to the date." And he hands it back to the first guy. Hadda was listening in by the door, heard the rabbi say the sketch siman, said the sketch siman. Rabbi does it, it gives the coin back to the rightful owner, the person that found it. Mitunim badin means, understand sometimes the way to get through to judgment is not in the most obvious way. You'll tell the guy there's no siman, the guy will fight back and forth. Sometimes the quickest way to get to the end result is actually by taking a little bit more time in the process of judgment. There was an amazing example of this as well with a wine merchant. There was a wine merchant who had a apprentice, and the apprentice worked for an entire year until finally the guy paid him. Anyway, he has 200 coins in his money pouch, and he's working in the basement of this guy who has the wine factory in his basement. And he comes to the rabbi and he's crying. Rabbi says, "What's the problem?" He says, "Rabbi, I just got paid for the year. I'm a poor guy. I'm working for my family. I have this money that the guy paid me. I must have left the money where I was working because I took it off of my belt this morning." He says, "I came back at the end of the day and the money is gone. But Rabbi, there's only two people who have the key to the wine cellar, me and the owner. I went to the owner said he didn't see it. But I think he's lying. Please," he says, "a year's worth of what's it called is going to go down the drain if you don't help me with your wisdom." The rabbi says, "No problem, relax, everything's going to be fine." He calls in the owner of the wine factory. And he says to him, "I understand that your apprentice lost some money in the wine cellar." He says, "Yes, he told me that this morning." He says, "Well, do you have it? Have you found it?" He says, "No, I haven't found it. I didn't find anything. I would never do that. I'm not that type of person." On and on and on. "You want me to swear? I'll swear." He's very defensive, going on and on. And the rabbi says, No, of course I believe you." I said, "But maybe it's worth going to take another look." He says, "No, I think it's," he goes, "We looked already, we checked." He says, "No, maybe it's worth taking another look. Because if you didn't steal it, and he obviously doesn't have it, and the only person that could have stolen it was somebody who broke into your cellar. And that means that some non-Jewish guy came into your cellar, was moving the barrels around, and took the money. Which means that I'm going to have to tell the entire community that all of your wine is yayin etzech." The guy says, maybe I should go take one last look. Maybe I didn't move all the barrels. I'm going to go look one more time. That's what mitunim badin means. My friends, our chachamim, in talking about din, use the term of judgment interchangeably with regards to adjudicating a legal matter, but also with regards to the way we judge when we judge. The same pasuk, "B'tzedek tishpot amitecha," is a commandment and an injunction given to a judge in a court, but also it's a commandment and an injunction given to a regular guy like me and you, who is not a bet din, who is not a judge. In fact, the Gemara, the Mishnah in Avot says that a person has an obligation to judge their friend favorably from this pasuk. So my friends, I would like to ask that question. What would it look like to be mitunim badin? What would it look like to not judge a person without having considered all the angles? What would it take? And then I want to give this idea in two parts. The first part of the idea is maybe you're wrong in your assessment. You know, social psychologists tell us that we make up our mind about someone in under 1 second. Fascinating. It's not expressions that we look at or notice, it's micro expressions. Fascinating. That means a person doesn't smile, but before you smile, you wrinkle your eyes a little bit. Your brain is attuned to those signs, and it can pick up that little squint of the eye before the smile even comes, and make a decision already. This is a happy person. This is a successful person. This is an intelligent person. I made a comment. I saw his face. I already know if he understands what I'm saying. You ever say that to someone? I don't think you understood what I just said. Based on what knowledge do you know? Why would you? That's your brain doing that. So if our brain is not willing to give someone even 1 full second before judging them, maybe Hevu Mitunim Badin could tell us that before we decide a person's a good guy, a bad guy, a person is a good woman, a bad woman, a person's Lashon Hara person, not Lashon Hara person, serious about Judaism, not serious about Judaism, could we give the guy 5 seconds? Now that sounds crazy, but I'm not asking, if I ask you for 5 seconds, I'm not asking you for something small. I'm asking you not for 100% increase. You understand this? I'm asking you for 1,000% increase on what an average person is taking in order to be able, right, to make up their mind. I think it's 1/10 of a second. 1,000% would be to take a second. Could you give 5 seconds? Could you give a minute? Could you decide before you meet someone, I have no idea who this person is, and I probably won't know for some time to come. You know, they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. But whose fault is that? It's our fault if all we give people is first impressions. Who made that law? You want to yell at your kid. Wait a minute. Try and figure out why. Why did they do this? Where's it coming from? That does not mean that you don't correct them. But it means that you correct them using the correct methodology. If, as an example, a child is doing something wrong, and they're doing something wrong because they want your attention. So what do you think your job is as a father or a mother? To correct them, to yell at them, to tell them to do the right thing. Look, if I don't tell him what to do, if I don't guide him, who's going to guide him? That's true. But what did you just do? You guided him away, not towards. The whole reason why he's poking the bear is so the bear will turn around and face him. What did you gain if you turned around and yelled at him? You did the opposite of what's needed. So Hevu Mitunim Badin, on the first part says, don't be sure you know what's going on here. Wait. Try and understand. Try and understand it. Go through it. Figure it out. Now that you took that extra second before you judge somebody, now in the carrying out of your judgment, think as well, is my first route the right way? You know, there are some people that say that the best thing in life is to not have a plan B. Ever hear that? What are we doing? We're building the shul. There is no plan B. We're building a school, we're building the mikvah, there is no plan B. You know what nice thing about plans is? They're free. Plans are free. The idea of having only one plan is a terrible idea. You just have to be disciplined enough to give everything you have to plan A before you move to plan B. That's your problem. You figure out that discipline. But the idea that you decide my response to my wife is going to be this. You know what? Great. Just before you respond, make 3 other plans. My response is going to be defensive and to push her away. because she behaved that way. She said that to me. She treated me like this. Okay, that's one option. Great, I love it. I love it. I love it. Great. You have another plan? What other options do we have? Let's just run through a couple different. That's what Hevu Mitunim Badin is. Sometimes you could engage in a long legal battle, or you could Rav Yaakov Melisa it and have the guy realize that, sorry, you could, the wine merchant guy, have the guy realize, if this is the path I'm taking, it actually costs me much more than I'm getting. Instead of fighting, arguing, you're a liar. You didn't need any of that. Hevu Mitunim Badin. Hashem should bless us that we should be Zocheh Be'ezrat Hashem in everything that we do to be able to be Mitunim Badin. And that, my friends, I think is what the connection is between last week's parasha and this one. You're telling me to do things in a beautiful way, to be Mitunim Badin. My friends, understand that sometimes your judgment and your justice is making a sacrifice out of somebody. Someone asked me, I mentioned this in the Gemara class last night. A boy who is dyslexic, it's time for him to read his bar mitzvah parasha. The boy cannot read. Is he allowed to read from the Torah? Someone asked me this question. So I said, I don't know. I'm going to think through the answer, because I think the answer is dependent on whether or not this child who has such severe dyslexia is actually reading at all or not. I need to speak to the child or to his the psychologist or to his doctor to ask him, how is the kid processing? Because if he's not reading at all, he can't read. Can't read the Torah because he's not reading the Torah. He's just saying something from memory. He can't be yotzeh anybody. Anyone who goes up to the Torah is bracha levatala, right? So let's first find out, what is he seeing when he's reading those words? I said, but we cannot just tell this boy no. Because telling a bar mitzvah boy, who every one of his friends is reading from the Torah, you can't read from the Torah. And all the kids come to the bar mitzvah, and they want to know what? And the kid feels like an outcast, like an imbecile, like a person who can't do anything. You've murdered a child. Hevu Mitunim Badin. Think twice before you rule. You know why? Because otherwise, the connection is to the Mizbeach. You just slaughtered someone. You sacrificed someone's soul. You burnt them at the stake. You killed their reputation. So my friends, in every one of these cases, we got to find a way. So what was the way? My rabbi said, you know what the way is? See if after he learns his piece by heart, he could then just recognize that the word I said, Vayomer, by sight, is that word, Vayomer. Even if he's not reading it. Even if it's like a picture association, Vayomer, Hashem, El, then he's actually reading what he's thinking. He's reading it in the Torah. It's okay. It doesn't need to be the normal process of reading. That's one way. What if he can't do that? So I said, I have a great idea. What do? You let him have his bar mitzvah in the Shabbat right before his bar mitzvah. And he goes up to the Torah for his own aliyah. Why? Because his bracha as a child is not a bracha levatala. So he reads his own part. You have the Chazan, read it again. But the kid went up to the Torah, he made his bracha, he read from the Sefer, as not as a bar mitzvah. That's Hevu Mitunim Badin. You don't have plan A doesn't work, let's come up with plan B. We got to make sure we're not killing anyone with our judgment. Because that's the underbelly of being a judge, is when the word for judge is Elohim, and you think that you have the power and the might and the right of God to destroy people in your search for justice. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.